I was in public school my whole life, and I think being in public school for my school career is one of the leading reasons why I've chosen not to put my son in public schools. I was really working hard in school. I remember pretty vividly when I was in first grade, my teacher said to the class that the sun was very far away from the earth. It's a totally appropriate statement for first graders. Great way to talk about the solar system for first graders. I raised my hand, being the smart aleck I was, and gave an exact mileage range for how far away the sun was from the earth. I got to sit in the hall that day and many, many other times during my first grade year because my teacher wasn't too fond of the fact that I was quick to kind of correct her, but not so much correct her as, in my mind I wasn't correcting her. In my mind I was bringing knowledge to the classroom. You can't just tell us that it's far away. We know it's far away. You've got to give us more information than that. Well, she was teaching a lot of the class where they were. And I wasn't feeling pushed. I wasn't feeling driven. I wasn't feeling drawn. So for me, I was totally lost in school. I would attend my classes all the way up through high school and be sitting there completely bored out of my mind. There were other students like me who were feeling lost because they were ahead. There were other students who were feeling lost because they weren't quite where the class was. And it became very apparent to me that the school system teaches to the middle ground. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. And of course, every teacher can't spend all of their time teaching to every kid in the classroom. There's just too many learning styles, personality types, levels, stages, everything that you can't possibly teach to everyone who's going to be in your class. At the same time, as someone who wasn't in that middle ground, it was very hard for me because I felt like I was being left behind, basically, or not necessarily left behind, but like left out of the picture. It made my interpersonal relationships with other students more difficult. It made things just a lot more difficult in school. So in high school, I pushed through. I had great support from my teachers and my counselors and my school principal to graduate a year early with a year of college classes under my belt as well. But it was hard work. I mean, I was sitting there trying to cram 4 years of work into 3, which the work was not hard. It was not strenuous. It was not difficult for me. I was able to comprehend the work. The problem came in that every single worksheet, every single little piece of paperwork was still having to cross my desk, which is fine. I'm not saying that I shouldn't have had to do the same work that the other students should have. Of course I should have. But the problem I have is that my studies were so filled with busy work that I have to question whether I was actually learning all that much or whether I was just studying to pass a test or studying for the next stage. So it was really frustrating to me because I feel like the schools teach so much to the middle ground and give so much paperwork and busy work that you just aren't really being able to learn the things that kind of actually matter in education. And that is absolutely not the fault of the teachers. It's not even really the fault of school administrators or anything like that. It's that you just can't stick 20 kids in a class and expect all of their needs to be met by one educator. So when you're homeschooling, you've got one kid, or in some family cases, 5, 6, 7 kids, but you're still in a much smaller kind of class size and have a lot more opportunity for that one-on-one interaction to teach kids. I really did feel like there was this big gap when I was in school that I didn't get the time from the teachers that I needed, that other students weren't getting the time they needed, that none of us were really learning according to our learning style. I know there were a lot of times when I was in school, and even back in elementary school, which has been longer than I want to admit, back when I was even in elementary school, you would spend a lot of time studying for weeks and weeks and weeks, and they would drill into your head, this is for the Iowa Test of Basic Skills, this is for the standardized test, you have to know this for the test, you have to know that for the test. And so you're sitting there and you're cramming all of this information in. You take this big test that you've been worked up for months, and then you forget. And then there is this thing that seemed to always happen year after year. Year after year, you'd start at the beginning of time with history, and you'd work your way through, and you'd work really hard, and all of a sudden you'd get to the end of the year, you're finally at the Industrial Revolution, school's out for summer, and you go back to school, and you're back in the beginning of time. And so it seemed like no matter what history class you were in, you rarely ever got to modern day, and if you did, it was in those last couple of weeks of school where you're trying to cram it all in, and you had no ability to pick up where you left off, because they can't control if a child comes from another school or another area or another state. Then they're going to get left behind because, well, maybe they didn't learn this at their school, and so they work so hard to teach to everybody that they're kind of teaching to nobody. And so for us in homeschooling, we can get to the end of the year and pick up where we left off the next year. Or we can decide to do school 3 days a week but go all year round. Or we can decide to do school even more than that and still go year round and do shorter days. Or there are a lot of options that you get in homeschooling where you can make sure that you're able to kind of go from where you left off. I understand why schools feel the need to start over, to repeat, to go over those things, and a lot of it does have to do with the standardized test. They want to make sure that you're starting there because that's what the test covers. But eventually we have to stop teaching towards the tests. We can't just teach because there is a test on this. We want to make sure we get our funding. We want to make sure we get, a standard of excellence. Those things are important, but they're not the only thing, and we're getting to a point where we feel like those are the only thing. For me and for my son, that's not the right fit, and I know that it's not the right fit, and it's something that I'm passionate about. I feel like from homeschooling, my son can benefit in that it's one-on-one education. He always knows that if he has a question, I will find him in the answer. Even if I don't know the answer, there are 1,000,001 resources out there. He will get the answer. And I will make sure it's the right answer. Because my son's education is important to me beyond measure. No standardized test will ever fully be able to tell me whether or not my child is learning where he should be. I think my biggest issue with the school system is that we're pushing kids who have different goals through a common system towards a common goal, when students and their goals and their dreams are so varied. And to teach to them as though they're all the same and that they all have the same path to take is ridiculous. And I just see that my battery's about to die, which is super sweet.